Then to move on to the next point that Imam al-Barbahari rahimahullah brings, point number 9, and the numbering here, and the translation is point number 11, but here point number 9 in this version, that the author rahimahullah said, وَأَعْلَمْ رحمك الله أنه ليس في السنة قياس ولا تضرب لها الأمثال ولا تتبع فيها الأهواء بل هو تصديق بآثار رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بلا كيف ولا شرح ولا يقال لما ولا كيف. And know, may Allah have mercy upon you, that there is no making analogies with regard to the Sunnah, nor reasoning with examples, and desires are not to be followed regarding it. Rather, it is just a case of affirming the narrations from Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam without asking how or explaining it away, and without saying why is that or how can that be. Shaykh Fawzan said in his explanation, what is meant by the Sunnah here, in the saying of Imam al-Barbahari, that there is no qiyaas, there is no analogy in the Sunnah. So what is meant by the Sunnah here, Shaykh Fawzan said, what is meant by the Sunnah here is the Aqeedah, Creed and Belief. There's no making analogy in matter of Creed and Belief. Because this book is on the topic of Aqeedah, and the Aqeedah, the correct creed, is the Sunnah, and this book is called Sharh as-Sunnah, an explanation of the Sunnah, an explanation of the correct creed. So here Imam al-Barbahari, he calls his book Sharh as-Sunnah, an explanation of the Sunnah, meaning what the book is about is Aqeedah, Creed and Belief. So that shows, as the Shaykh Fawzan said, what is meant here by the word the Sunnah. There's no analogy in the Sunnah, meaning there's no analogy in the Aqeedah, Creed and Belief. He said, Shaykh Fawzan said, it is called Sunnah because the Sunnah is the path, the correct path. Then he said, and the Aqeedah, the Creed and Belief, is tawqifiyya, is dependent upon text. No scope for intellect, no scope for people's opinions. Aqeedah, there has to be text. So he said the Aqeedah, the Creed and Belief, is dependent upon text. There is no scope at all for adding anything to it. It hinges upon what occurs from Allah and from His Messenger. And whatever is contrary to what came from Allah and His Messenger, then it is batil, it is false and futile, and it is dalal, it is misguidance. So this is the meaning of the saying of the scholars, that Aqeedah is tawqifiyya. Aqeedah depends upon text. Analogy does not enter into it, because qiyas, analogy, can only be in issues of fiqh. They are where analogy, qiyas, can enter, matters of fiqh, and they are the rulings of what is halal, what is lawful, and what is haram, what is forbidden. As for the matters of Aqeedah, then there is no analogy in them. There's nothing in Aqeedah we say we believe this, we can base on the text, there's some other attribute here, we make an analogy with that. No such thing in Aqeedah. No analogy in Aqeedah. As for the matters of Aqeedah, the Shaykh said, then there is no analogy in them. Rather, it is just taslim, submission, and inqiyad, compliance to that which came from Allah and His Messenger, without any interference. Then before continuing the Shaykh Fawzan's explanation just on this point of qiyas in this matter here, again Shaykh Salih ibn Sa'd al-Suhaimi hafidhahullah, he said here, to further clarify this point about analogy in this matter, he said, what is meant by qiyas, analogy, is that which texts are rejected on account of. That is prohibited in the Sunnah. If somebody brings an analogy, there's a clear text saying something, somebody brings an analogy, say no, we analogize this with that, and we reject the text based on analogy. The Shaykh said this is prohibited in the Sunnah. Indeed, it is prohibited in all of the Islamic rulings. I mean, doing this, bringing an analogy, or this ruling that's something established in the Sunnah, so we bring an analogy and refuting that point that's established in the Sunnah. The Shaykh said this is prohibited in all the rulings of the Sharia, doing this analogy in this manner. Then he said, as for the analogy which is well known with the people of usul, people of fundamentals of fiqh, and it is, and he gives the definition of analogy qiyas, it is joining a text of a detail, a text which we don't, rather it is joining a matter for which we do not have a text, joining it to a matter which we do have a text for, based upon a ruling in that matter, built upon a reason that is common to both of them, when there is no text to be found. Just to quickly, without making it less clear, meaning that there's a matter where there's a text, there's a clear text about that matter, and the reason for its being, for example, something forbidden, and the reason it's forbidden is something clear. It's forbidden because of such reason that's found in it. Then we have something else that we don't know the ruling for, but the reason, the same reason is found. The reason this is forbidden is found in the second matter as well, that we don't know the ruling. So some of the scholars, they say, right, we can make an analogy. The first thing there is clearly something forbidden, and it's got this matter, this reason present there. The second matter, we don't know the ruling for it, but the reason is in that as well. So we make an analogy, say this matter is like that matter because there's common reason. So just as that is forbidden by text, then this second matter here is forbidden by analogy on that matter which we have a text for. So the Shaykh just gives a definition of that. He said, as for this matter here, analogy in this way, then this is a matter which is acted upon, and it is something which the Salaf stated. However, it is only resorted to when there is a dire need. It's not something that happens all the time. Only resorted to when there's a dire need to do this. So it is a supplementary principle, and it is not a fundamental principle. The fundamental principles are the Book of Allah, the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and ijma, consensus. They are fundamental principles which are agreed upon. As for qiyas, then it is a supplementary principle which is only resorted to when there is a dire need. First three, they're clear proofs whenever, but this is only when there's a dire need. The Shaykh said it is resorted to just in the same way that dead meat is resorted to. In the case of dire need, a person can eat from dead meat. It is just like eating dead meat. When a text is not present, we've got a matter of question and we can't find a text, or the text cannot be understood, or so on and so forth, then in that case analogy can be resorted to, and it is particular to rulings of the legislation, the detailed rulings of legislation. But as for the Sunnah in general, then there is no analogy, no qiyas in the Sunnah, because it is either a text from the Book of Allah or from the way of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the generality of the Sunnah, first and foremost from that being the Aqeedah, there's no analogy, no making analogy in that matter. So in this matter is like that, and no such thing. Rather in the details of fiqh, where there's no text to be found. That is the scope for qiyas analogy. With regard to Shaykh Fawzan, Allah's explanation, he continues, he said, his saying, وَلَا تُتَّبَعُوا فِيهَا الْأَهْوَاءِ, having already said that there is no making analogies with regard to the Sunnah, and he said, nor any reasoning with examples. Now he said, وَلَا تُتَّبَعُوا فِيهَا الْأَهْوَاءِ, and desires are not to be followed regarding it. With regard to the Sunnah, desires are not to be followed. Shaykh Fawzan said, meaning, it is not to be said concerning the Aqeedah, Creed and Belief, whatever agrees to your desires can be accepted, and whatever goes against your desires, you should reject it. Some people say, what do you feel about this matter here? Do you feel this is correct, this matter of belief? Does it feel right to you or something, or does it feel wrong to you? And the like of that. Shaykh Fawzan said, no, this cannot be said. This is wrong. Do not say about matter of Aqeedah, whatever complies with your desires, then that's it, you accept it. Whatever goes against you, what you feel, what your desires, you reject it. As is the way of the people of misguidance. And therefore, they were called Ahlul Ahwa. People of misguidance, the people of innovations, are given the title by the scholars, Ahlul Ahwa, literally, the people of desires. People of innovation and innovations, what they're called by the scholars is Ahlul Ahwa, the people of desires. Shaykh Fawzan said, He the Most High said, فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَجِيبُوا لَكَ فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّمَا يَتَّبِعُونَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ وَمَنْ أَضَلُّ مِمَّنِ اتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ بِغَيْرِ هُدًى مِنَ اللَّهِ. Surah Al-Qasas, the 28th surah, ayah 50. With the explanation. So if they do not respond to you, addressed to the Prophet, referring to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if those people do not respond to you, then know that they are just following their desires. And who is more astray than one who follows his desires without guidance from Allah? Shaykh Fawzan said, commenting upon this ayah, so whoever does not submit to the Aqeedah, the Creed and Belief, that is established in the Book and the Sunnah, then he is just following his desires. And therefore, the people of innovations in Aqeedah, Creed and Belief, are called Ahlul Ahwa, the people of desires. Those that won't submit to the Creed and Belief found in the Book and the Sunnah, what they're doing, they're just following their desires. And whatever they say, the excuses they make for themselves, they're just following their desires. And as the Shaykh said, that's why they're called the people of desire. People of innovations in Aqeedah are called the people of desires, because they are just following their desires, as occurs in the ayah, وَمَنْ أَضَلُّ مِمَّنِ اتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ بِغَيْرِ هُدًى مِنَ اللَّهِ. Same ayah with the explanation. And who is more astray than one who follows his desires without guidance from Allah? Then Shaykh Fawzan finishes this section by saying, bringing the point, he's saying, بل هو التصديق بآثار رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بلا كيف ولا شرح ولا يقال لما ولا كيف. Rather, it is just a case of affirming the narrations from Allah's Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم without asking how and without explaining it away and without saying why is that and how can that be. Shaykh Fawzan said, meaning at-taslim, submission to the sayings of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam with regard to the asma and sifat, with regard to the names and attributes of Allah and the matters of Aqeedah, Creed and Belief. It's just taslim, submitting. Bila sharh, without giving explanation, without explaining away. Shaykh Fawzan said, explain this point, because this is a point where people in innovation sometimes misuse this. So we leave the attributes of Allah, we leave what's mentioned in the text, with no explanation, we don't understand anything from it, we just affirm the word, and we don't understand it, we don't explain the word, we don't understand the word, just leave it. So Shaykh Fawzan refutes that, he said, and they use the like of this point here. So Shaykh Fawzan said, bila sharh, literally without explaining. Shaykh Fawzan said, meaning without giving an explanation which is contrary to its correct meaning, without giving a false meaning, without giving a new false meaning to it. So Shaykh Fawzan said, bila sharh, without giving an explanation, without explaining away, said meaning not giving an explanation which is contrary to its correct meaning. And it is an explanation which is contrary to what the texts indicate. And this became widespread amongst the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila and the Ash'aris. And that's what Al-Barbahari is refuting, the false explanations and misinterpretations that they gave to the attributes. That's what he's refuting here. He's not saying that we don't give any meaning to the attributes, don't understand any meaning from them. But he's refuting false meanings given by the like of these people, as the Shaykh said, which became widespread amongst the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila and the Ash'aris. Then Shaykh Fawzan gives examples. He said, such as they're claiming that what is meant by al-yad, by Allah's hand, is al-qudra, ability. And what is meant, they say, by al-wajh, by Allah's face, is al-dhat, is His self. And that what is meant by al-istiwa, Allah's ascending, is al-istila, His overcoming. Shaykh Fawzan said, this is a sharh batil, false and futile explanation. This is not the meaning of these texts. I mean, these false interpretations, false explanations, is not the meaning of the text. So he's saying bila sharh, without explanation, meaning without any false explanation. As for explaining them with the meaning of making clear, explaining their correct meaning, then this is true. This is true.